Hello, good morning. Let's talk about SSL tunnel and PKI. So, last time we had a discussion for a secure connection between a client to a server, which is in the internet server, which is hosted on the internet. The client want to access this server, which is on the internet, and internet is not secure. So, we need an SSL TLS tunnel before proceeding the real traffic or the real payload what the client want to send us setup if the server is a bank server or if the server is a some e-commerce server is a server of the some Netflix or web series web host server, right? So before sending any traffic, we will have to establish an SSL TLS connection between the client and the server. So we have a three triads. It's called the triad, which is a very important in the SSL TLS. One is a confidentiality, integrity, authentication. So we will heard about the CIA. It's a very catchy word, CIA. It's similar to the American agency CIA. So just confidentiality, integrity, authentication. In this top in this video, we will talk about the more about the PKI or the authentication. What's it's a PKI? Okay, so integrity and confidentiality we will talk in some other day or in the other video. So what is an authentication or the PKI and what is why we need an SSL TLS? So first thing is SSL TLS. SSL TLS having broadly saying it's a depend on the three triads: confidentiality, integrity, authentication, CIA. Okay. Confidentiality meaning encryption, integrating is in hashing, and authentication is the authentic or the validated. It's a legitimate server or a device which is going to send the data. So that is a authentication. It is done by the or it could be done by the pre-shared key, but we will more focus on the PKI. Okay. So what is a PKI? So PKI is a triangle, right? It's a public key infrastructure. It's a triangle. Depend on three nodes. One is a server which is hosted in the publicly. The other is a client or a machine which wants to access this server to have some communication with us or to do a transaction. It could be a real-time transaction or it could be sometime it just need to access some information or database or to watch movie, or it could be e-commerce the real time, and one is a root CA. So it's a kind of a triangle. Okay. So what is a why? So server, how the server will generate a certificate. Okay. So in the PKI public key infrastructure, server needs a some sort of a certificate, right? Like a human, if you want to citizen want to prove its identity, he needs a passport or some country card, right? Citizenship card, country card, passport, any authorized card which can prove its identity. It's a legitimate guy. It's not impersonating someone else. So why we need? So that is a that is why we need a certificate, a digital certificate in the digital world. So we have a who will issue this digital certificate. The digital certificate will be issued by a third party, which have got the authority. It could be a DigiCert interest, like we have 7 or 8 root CA who can issue the digital certificate so that it can validate its identity and generate its certificate for it. So it's like a government, it's like a authority who can uh, give the certificate or a card to prove its identity. So basically, why do we need a digital certificate? It's to prove its identity as well as the legitimacy, right? So why? So server has to always prove its identity, right? If you have a one server bank abc.com and the other bank is uh, fraudsterabc.com, right? So we will just need to identify who is a real bank abc.com. So for to validate my identity, I need a certificate. I need a ID proof, and that ID proof is in the digital world is called the digital certificate. But it could not be anyone can give this digital certificate, right? Because it has to be communicate with the rest of the world. It's not like the it's going to communicate with its own network. If it's going to talk to in the own network, then this digital certificate can be signed by or give by the any of the local CA. But here we need something called the global CA, a root CA, which is trust by all over the world, right? So we have 8 or 9 root CA, global root CA, like a DigiCert interest. It will validate the identity of the server and generate the certificate. So need to validate its identity. Okay, there are 4 or 5 process generation of this, right? Generation of the public key and private key. So when server want to have a digital server certificate signed by the root CA, it has to generate a public key and a private key. Okay, public key and a private key. Public PK plus PVK. PUK and the PVK. So it will have a public key as well as a private key. The private key is something which is not going to be shared with anyone. Public key will going to the root CA with the content. Okay, so the content means that what is the information of the domain name, what is the name of the server, which organization this server belongs to, what is the location of the organization, all these details, right? Then it will submit to the root CA. Root CA before signing this digital certificate, or sorry, signing this certificate for the server, it will validate its identity. It will check the OU, it will check the EU, into email. Sometime it try to call these organization also. Suppose what happened, I am a bank ABC, I'm a legitimate bank ABC. I have some other fraudster who is also ABC and try to he just got to know from someone on that day that bank is going to generate a certificate and going to submit to the root CA. So that fraudster bank ABC also try to submit the root CA, right? But it's CSR request to the root CA. But it's not like that. Root CA doesn't sign all the certificate without validation. So sometime do a it try to call the organization, it try to call the email, right? It try to send an email, it try to call the people of this organization response. Sometimes it send the people over on the premises also, some they need a physical address of the organization, right? So these once they will complete their process like in a background check process, then only it will generate a certificate. And this certificate which will be generated, it will be signed by the root CA private key. Okay, so once this root CA certificate validate the identity of server, generate the certificate, and it will signed by the public private key of the root CA. Then it will send back to the server for the submitted back to the server, and the server will install it, right? So this is called a digital server. Once it will install, then we have a digital certificate. So that is a that is the role of the root CA. Okay, and how we request the certificate, digital certificate from the root CA, that is called the CSR, certificate signing request. Once the request is done, it's signed validation is done, generate the certificate signed by the private key of the root C, then it will come to the server. Okay, on the client side, on the hardware side, and the browser, if you look on the browser or you go to the cert manager on the Windows, you will also find some of sort of the certificates, right? Like a DigiCert, Interest, they have those certificates, but those are the very generic certificate. So you have 10 of these devices, all these 10 devices have those certificate, right? That's called the list of the trusted CA certificate, right? So in that certificate, what we have the public key of the root CA, right? So key is generally, what is a key? Key is like a number, right? So its key is a number. So we have a, if you go to the browser and as well as cert manager of Windows, you can see the list of the trusted CA. So if this server send its certificate, right, then it will match the, try to authenticate it with the help of the trusted root CA which is installed on this client, to identify whether it's a legitimate certificate or not, and is it signed by the, with the help of the public key present in this, right? So that is a, all the stories goes in the PKI mode. So PKI is just a triangle, okay, and it's using for the authentication and the SSL TLS. And one more very important thing, that the PKI is, like a lot of the people say that private keys and the public key, private key is for the encryption and public key is a decryption. It's not like that. You generate a two keys, it depends on you which key you will choose as for the encryption and which key you will choose as a decryption. Okay, it's just a number, it's very arbitrary. If you choose key 1 as a encryption and if you choose key 2 as a decryption, then obviously you will not send the key which is you're using for the encryption, right? So that is called a private key. So private key is like a, there's no nothing like that. Private key only encrypted or decrypted, right? The one which you don't want to share with the customer or the other people outside the world, it's a private key. And the one which can you will share, but anyone can encrypt it or decrypt it, but only one job. So suppose we have two private key, A and B has been generated. In case one, if A is doing a encryption, then A could not do the decryption, B will only do the decryption and B could not do the encryption. If case 2, A is doing the decryption, the B can only do the encryption, right? So one key, one job. Okay, so that's a very wrong concept, that the PKI or the private key do the is an encryption, or the private key is just like a decryption. That's a very wrong concept, wrong fundamental. Okay, thank you.